Hi everyone. I hope everybody is staying safe and is doing really well. As you guys know, I started a book club and I'm really excited about it. I've always wanted to start a book club, so yeah, that's kind of where we're at now. And I think we're all kind of feeling pretty isolated right now, as we should be. But I thought a book club would be like a perfect way for us all to come together. So thank you to everyone that, read the book and is a part of it. The response was nothing that I ever could have imagined. Like, I've been wanting to have a book club for so long with my friends, but it's hard to all be in the same place. And then I realized, this is what social media exists for, is to bring us all together and allow things like this. So, as you guys know, this week we decided to read Normal People, which is one of my favorite books ever. I read it for the first time about a year ago, I think, and just fell in love with it and have continued to reread it over and over again. And so I just thought it was kind of the perfect opportunity because they actually have turned it into a Hulu show that's coming out at the end of the month. So I just felt like this was perfect timing, with the Hulu show. And, Daisy and Paul will be joining me at some point during this live if I can figure out how to use live, because I've never done this before. So they're going to be jumping on here to talk kind of about the show and the book and the similarities, the differences. I actually got to watch a couple episodes of the show already. You guys are going to love it. I absolutely loved it. So yeah, first, I wanted to start by doing kind of like a brief summary of the book for those of you who haven't read it, or just to kind of refresh everyone's memories. Basically, it's about a couple, Marian and Connell, who go to high school together. Connell is a bit more popular and has friends. Marianne is kind of the opposite, an outsider, doesn't have very many friends. And they start this kind of secret relationship. And the book follows Connell and Marianne's relationship throughout 4 years, kind of as they continue to break each other's hearts but still find their way back to each other, how the feelings that they have for each other don't really shift, even if they don't fit into each other's lives at that exact moment. It's about not losing that love, and I think that's what's really beautiful about this book particularly. And there's actually a line in the book. I highlighted the book as I read it, as I do for most books, just because I get a lot of advice and kind of things that inspire me from the books that I read. So I usually do that. But I did highlight some quotes that I have in front of me that I kind of wanted to share with you. And also I wanted to ask you guys what stuck out for you in the book. So, I think this quote is actually about how fiction sometimes, the truths within fiction help us understand more of the reality of our lives. And, it's something to consider because this book, while it is fiction, I think it connects to a lot of us in a lot of different ways. And we can all find little bits of ourselves throughout this book. And Sally Rooney, the author, I think did an incredible job of making the book feel very human and real, so that no matter what kind of relationship you've been through, I think you find bits of yourself and your heart, in all of this. So the first quote that I highlighted is, "The same imagination he uses as a reader is necessary to understand real people also, and to be intimate with them." And that is referring to Connell. I just thought that was, a really, really beautiful quote. I tend to use books a lot for my everyday life, and I feel like I find myself learning lessons and experiencing things through books. That's why I love them so much. So I really liked that quote. And, this also goes along well with the idea, and this is also a quote from the book. It says, "Life is the thing that you bring with you inside your own head." And I remember reading that quote for the first time, and I stopped in my tracks. I was so involved in this book, and I was just completely immersed. And I read that, and I just remember stopping and being like, wow, because it is true. If we all were experiencing life as just what was around us, it would take away the uniqueness and the beauty of our lives. I think it's very personal. It's, you know, life is not the world around us, it's the way in which we perceive the world around us. And yeah, I thought that was so incredibly beautifully done. So I thought, you know, I wanted to also talk to you guys, ask you guys questions, and see what you had to say about the book. I don't know if you all had read this before or who was reading it for the first time. But I'm jealous of the people that got to read it for the first time. I've found that I can kind of experience it differently each time, focusing on different characters and different parts of the book, because it does follow a long time span. So, I think first I was just going to read some of the quotes that I'd highlighted and see if you guys had any that you wanted to share. But this was one of my favorite quotes from the book is, what they have now they can never have again, but for her the pain of loneliness will be nothing to the pain that she used to feel of being unworthy. He brought her goodness like a gift, and now it belongs to her. I think that is so true about relationships. And, you know, a large part of the love in a relationship is showing someone how to love a part of themselves that maybe they didn't love before, and that can never be taken away even long after the relationship is done. That love that you grow for yourself in a relationship, that stays with you forever. And I think Connell showing Marianne how to love parts of herself, even in times when he wasn't in her life, you know, she still carried that love with her. And I think that's such a beautiful thing to remember, is that no one can take that away from you. And I think, let me find another quote. Okay, another quote that I loved is, where is it? Oh, there's a quote from Marianne that I just think talks a lot about masochism, and that's another really interesting concept. So this was a quote from her. It said, "She would have lain on the ground and let him walk over her body if she wanted. He knew that." And I think this book is very interesting because it talks about power dynamics between a man and a woman. But, you know, when it's Marianne and Connell, it comes from a place of love and of mutual understanding and of safety. And I think that that's what's very important, is she wanted to give herself to this man because she loved him and because she trusted him and he cared about her. And I think it's an interesting take that Sally took on, you know, masochism and kind of how women handle that and men handle that, things like that. Another quote that I really, really loved is, "Whatever there is between him and Marianne, nothing good has ever come of it. It has only ever caused confusion and misery for everyone. He can't help Marianne, no matter what he does. There's something frightening about her, some huge emptiness in the pit of her being. It's like waiting for a life to arrive, and when the doors open, nothing is there. Just the terrible, dark emptiness of the elevator shaft, on and on forever. She's missing some primal instinct, self-defense, or self-preservation, which makes other human beings comprehensible. You lean in, expecting resistance, and everything just falls away in front of you. Still, he would lie down and die for her at any minute, which is the only thing he knows about himself that makes him feel like a worthwhile person." That, to me, is such a complex take on loving someone that much, because he sees the places that she scares him and maybe that she's flawed, but, you know, he says that his willingness and ability to do anything for her is the reason that he knows he's a worthy person. And, you know, that's real love, I think. But I could honestly talk and read quotes from this book all day, so I want to have you guys ask questions if you have any. I can try to read comments. I technically need reading glasses, so this will be really interesting, but if anyone has any questions, please comment them. Or your favorite parts of the book. Also, you should see the rig that I have set up right now. It's very DIY, makeshift. If anyone has questions, please. I also quickly, I think when you guys watch the show, you'll find it really beautifully done. I want to say this kind of before I have Daisy and Paul on because I'm fangirling since I got to watch it early, and it's so beautifully done. And I have a hard time like finally watching something that I've read, especially when I've read it so much, like this book. And I think they just the way that they did it, I couldn't have imagined it better, and that's why I think it was so well done. And I also really quickly wanted to touch on Sally Rooney. I don't know if you guys know much about her. She also wrote Conversations with Friends, which she's known for. But she actually was she was on the debate team. So you can kind of, I feel like that kind of comes into Connell and Marianne's back and forth throughout the book. It seems like I think that's what makes you feel so connected to them, even from the beginning pages, is that quick back and forth that they have and that chemistry. And I think that comes a lot from, Sally's debate background. And a lot of people do compare her novels to kind of classic 19th century love stories, that kind of slow burning passion, where it's like life moves around this one linear line of two people who are madly in love. And I do feel like this book follows a lot of that, almost like a Pride and Prejudice type of way. But I do think the real moments are what bring it back to real life. It does show them doing normal things and, having coffee and being at school, things like that bring it back to reality. And that's, I think, why people connect. We got a question from Charlotte. Hi, Charlotte. She said, who do you relate to more, Marianne or Connell? Gosh. I think I find parts of myself in both of them. I think I relate to both of their kind of the way that they hold back things that they want to say, either to protect each other or because they're afraid of getting hurt. But I did find that very relatable, just the way that kind of they've lost so much in their relationship because neither of them really want to stand up and say how they feel. Which character did you identify with the most? So I think that's probably, I think I find parts of myself in both of them. What did I think of the ending? I find the ending really sad, honestly. I think there's hope, and that's a beautiful thing to end on. I don't even consider it an ending. But I did find it really sad because there's parts when you're reading that book, it's like you just want to grab them and shake them and be like, can you just tell each other that you love each other and you want to be with each other? But it doesn't happen like that. And in real life, it doesn't always happen like that. And it's beautiful that Marianne is willing to allow Connell to go and do, what he wants. But I think at the end of the day, it's like, he wants her to ask him to stay and she doesn't. And that is very sad to me. Someone said, do you believe that the show does justice to the book? I could not hold the show higher. Like, it's everything and more that you want it to be. And it's such a difficult thing, I think, adapting a book into a movie or a TV show, especially when it has such a big fan base or people who really, love it so much and are so passionate about it. So, I think it's incredible. It's so good. I do want to try to get Daisy on here, which I'm very excited about because I just watched the show. I need to figure out how to do this. All right, let's get Daisy on here. This is really exciting, guys. Hi. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me. This is
I also literally just watched the show last night, so it's like surreal to have you now here.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy as well because you've just finished the book as well, so it's so like
yes, I know. Together. It's so well done, by the way. Congrats.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sure it's weird to like celebrate in quarantine, but
yeah, it's a strange
like you have this huge thing happening, but
yeah, to be talking about it when all this madness is happening. But yeah. I'm really glad that you liked it, and yeah, I'm excited for it to come out.
And so you're from England, yeah?
Yes, I'm from
And London. You're in London currently?
Yes, I am, yeah.
Because I know that doing an accent is not easy. I had no idea. I was fully expecting you to be...
from Sligo. Oh, thank you.
That is not an easy accent because Paul is
not... Yeah, he is. He's from just outside Dublin. Yeah, he's from Maynooth.
So it's a bit easier for him, I'm sure.
Yeah, still quite a different accent, but he's very good at it.
Well done, truly.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, how long have you been acting? Is this a new thing?
Yeah, so I've been I had my first kind of professional job when I was 17, so it's been about like 4 years kind of doing little jobs here and there, but this was my first like main part. Yeah, so it was kind of a good way to start, because I think if I'd had to have started doing a bigger part, I probably would have just absolutely
it's a bit intimidating
and not been able to do it at all. But yeah, so I kind of had my training on little parts here and there. So yeah.
And had you read the book before?
No, I hadn't. But my best friend, she bought it for my flatmate for her birthday and was like, "It's the best book. You have to read it." And I was like, "Oh, this looks good." I think she's actually doing her dissertation on it now. Like, she loves it.
Oh, really? I would, if I had a dissertation, I would do it on this 100%.
I know. It'd be a good, you could do like a comparison between the book and the series. It'd be quite good.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
And, we're pausing a bit.
I kind of,
this is technical difficulties that we deal with in the 21st century. There we go. We have you back. But did you find it intimidating to work on a project that so many people had already kind of read the book and were familiar, had their own ideas in their head about it?
Yeah, massively. Because I'm a big book reader like you, and I always sort of watch literary adaptations, and I'm always like, that's not quite, like, I'm very attached to the world I create, and I think it's like, it's Sally Rooney's writing means that when you read the book, you really feel that you have ownership of the characters, and they take you into their world, and you just get kind of swept up in their whole story. So I think that I definitely felt that when I read it, that I felt very connected to the characters. So I did feel a lot of pressure, because I know that she's a really wonderful character, but she's also a very complicated character, and there's lots about her that I really felt I understood, but there's lots that I didn't so much. So I definitely wanted to make sure I did it right. So I did feel a wee bit of pressure, yes, for sure.
Yeah, because you say, like, I think the thing about Marianne that's so complex is she has this, especially in the beginning, this kind of like, I don't care what anyone thinks about me, but in a lot of ways I feel like she is very insecure. Yes, and did you find, like, what parts of her did you find were the most difficult to portray?
Yeah, because it's really interesting. Like, Marianne in school, it was my favorite part to play, was actually Marianne in the school stuff. I kind of loved the way she didn't, she has a really interesting, Sally writes in the book where she talks about sort of the social ladder, and Marianne feels that she's kind of, sometimes she feels that she's on it, she's just very far below, and then sometimes she feels that she's kind of just on the outside, able to watch it without feeling the need to be attached to it. And I think that's a really interesting thing. I definitely didn't really relate in terms of my school life to that so much, because I definitely wanted to be on the social ladder. I wanted to be liked, whereas Marianne kind of, she just assumes that she isn't, so she doesn't kind of feel the need to try. But the bit that she talks about, where Marianne talks about the fact that she went into school one of the days and tried to put on a different sort of skin and tried to be different to see if it would change the way others treated her, but it just doesn't. And I think I definitely related to that, about feeling like I'd grown up over the years, but that my peers would only see me a certain way, and then going to college and suddenly being able to be the person I felt I'd grown up to be. I definitely related to that aspect of her.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so interesting, like, as she grows, kind of what parts of her insecurities start to come out more. And but and then socially she becomes like this social butterfly, and like she has all these friends, and I found like kind of the development of her character really interesting. And I also wanted to ask, like, I think it deals a lot with this sort of like theme of masochism and her with men, the difference between her relationship with Connell and her relationship with these other men throughout the story. And did you find working with a female, because I heard you were working with a female director, and a female intimacy coordinator, and I think that's so important. Did you find working with women, you know, on these more intimate scenes or maybe darker scenes that you felt more comfortable, or there was a sort of language between you and Paul that kind of made you feel more comfortable?
Yeah, it was really the whole of that aspect of it was so wonderfully handled. And so we had Lenny directed the first block and Hetty on the second block, and we had two female DOPs, which was really cool. So the cinematographers, the camera women.
Oh, wow.
And they're obviously, when you're doing those scenes, they're the closest to you. So
yeah,
it's really lovely to feel that I had, you know, had that. But everyone just handled it so brilliantly. And Ita, the intimacy coordinator, was just wonderful. And it just meant for a really safe environment, because those scenes are so beautifully written and so important to their story. And, you know, as they develop over the novel, they're just, they're really key to the narrative. And it was very important to do them justice in the series. And, but what I love about it is those scenes are always furthering on the story. They're never just sort of for the sake of it, if you know what I mean. They're very much important story beats. So having a safe environment where all the kind of choreography was sort of sorted out for us meant that we could just concentrate on the narrative that we were trying to tell, or the story beat that we were trying to further along, which was really brilliant. So definitely having that was so wonderful. Having a kind of 50-50 was really brilliant.
Yeah, and I thought, because I only watched the first 2 episodes, but those scenes, you really, like, I felt like the amount of time that were spent on them, and they're not just brushed past as normally I feel like in a series they'll kind of brush through those scenes, and in the book they are very important. And so I found when watching it, like, you guys gave them the same importance, and it just like translated so beautifully. I'm so glad,
because we were really, like, I mean, in episode 2, one of the scenes is actually my favorite in the whole series. I think it's so brilliantly handled. And I love the book, actually, where it's like the first time Marianne loses her virginity, and it's so like wonderfully awkward and messy and kind of brilliantly real,
but it's in like the most beautiful way. And it translates so well.
It makes it so much more romantic because it's something I can relate to. It's not like beautifully lit and billowing sort of sheets and everything.
I know, and that's what people want. It's like that, you know, if that's your idea of what it's going to be like, it's just so not realistic. And this was like, so you can tell the love and like the friendship, but it just was so well done. And
definitely.
Yeah, and it was given, like, I think the perfect amount of time and patience and effort that it needed to have. So that was really amazing. I also think, you know, there's a part of the book where it says, from Connell's perspective, that he was never as damaged as Marianne was, and that she made him feel that way. And did you find getting to a place, you know, Marianne has been through a lot and she kind of has this darker part of herself. Did you find getting, like, what aspect of Marianne did you find the most difficult or the hardest to dig into?
Definitely, I think it's a really interesting thing, because I think when she goes to Trinity, it would be very easy to kind of play the idea that she's suddenly just happy and everything's fine, you know, and she has all these friends and she feels settled. But I think actually, weirdly, Marianne feels almost more alone in that time, because she's, you know, she has a really tricky relationship with who she is. And I you know, you used a quote, I wrote it down. I was like making notes. You used a quote where it's like, life is the thing you bring in your own head. And I think Marianne has a very kind of tricky view of herself. You know, she kind of feels she is ultimately unlovable or unworthy of love. And I think I definitely felt that as the sort of series goes on and she grows up, she gets to a stage where she really feels that she's unworthy of the love that others give her. And I think I found that very difficult, because I think, I mean, Paul will say the same. We really love Marianne and Connell. We really care about them and you know, want them to be happy. So I think especially the stuff where she goes to Sweden and you know, when she's with the relationship with Jamie and stuff, where she's really miserable, really, but she kind of doesn't know how to break out of it, or sort of feels she deserves that kind of relationship. I found very tough. I mean, Paul and I would often like be on the way to set being like, oh man, I just want them to get on. Like,
I know. And I feel like when you're reading it, even you feel that way. Like I was saying, you want to grab both of them and just be like, can you guys just love each other?
You're all right. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing, because I think it's so wonderfully relatable, because you know, it's what I love about the story in the series is it talks about sort of young love and two young people growing up, but it doesn't at all sort of take anything lightly or patronize you know, young people,
Mm-hmm.
because often you see sort of teenage romance depicted quite like, oh, young love, you know, it's very sort of lovely and wonderful, but it's when you fall in love for the first time, it's a really deep feeling, and when you feel heartbreak for the first time, it's huge. As
Mm-hmm.
well as the kind of, as you grow up and you start to find out who you are, it's a very tricky time. It's a huge
Absolutely.
part of growth between 17 and 22. So I like that we, you know, the book is so wonderfully deep and these characters are so flawed and complicated, and I think that's a really important story to tell, and so relatable for
100%.
us, you know.
Oh my gosh, I think it was probably the book I've related to the most, and the show is even done in such a way that you feel like you're there, and it's done very intimately. And I'm truly like, congratulations, you guys
Oh,
could not have done a better job,
thank you
and
so much.
I'm so excited for everyone to get to watch it. I feel
I
like so
hope you
honored that I
like
got it
it.
early.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, truly, and thank you for joining. I know it's late there, but I'm so happy that I get to talk to you, and now I get to talk to Paul.
Yeah, definitely. Say hello to Paul from me. I'll be
I
watching.
will. I will. Have a wonderful night. Please stay
Thank
safe.
you. You
Thank
too.
you again.
Bye.
Guys, I'm freaking out. She's so lovely. Honestly, though, like, I think you guys are truly going to love this show so much. I'm gonna bring Paul on here now. Paul plays Connell. Let's. Oh, we're dropping things too. My rig is not very sturdy. Okay.
Yes, I just moved over to London about like 2 weeks ago, so it's a bit mad.
I just spoke to Daisy. She's
Yeah, I
lovely.
watched it. This is the best.
But you're not from London. You're from outside of Dublin, she was saying.
No, I'm from Maynooth, yeah, about 40 minutes outside Dublin.
So you didn't have to fake an accent, or did you? Was it different?
It's a bit further away from me, but easier than Daisy had it, I think.
I know, because I think that's probably. I was trying last night to do an accent, and I realized it's like a little bit more American, I would say, than British.
Totally,
Like
yeah,
for me, it
we all
felt
are.
too, yeah, like felt too close to home. I don't know.
Yeah.
But thank you for joining.
Thank you very much for having me, and
I'm
thank you so
sure
much for coming
it
on the
must
book.
be weird though to have to do this all from home. Like, how have you been managing?
No, it's like just considering the show's coming out so soon, like we've been doing kind of all our press for it from our front rooms, and so this is relatively normal at the moment, which is good.
Yeah. Well, how is this your first time doing a show like this? How long have you been acting?
I've been acting about 3 or 4 years, but this is my first kind of job on screen. So I've been in
Hmm.
theater before that.
And did I was asking Daisy, like, did you find it intimidating because Connell is such a character that people have this like image of him in their head? Like, how did you find kind of trying to adapt that into a TV show?
Yeah, I did. I think it's highly stressful when like you read a book and you love a character and then you're kind of given the responsibility to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it obviously adds pressure, but I think ultimately it's a healthy pressure because it means that the character is really well drawn and
Mm-hmm.
really well written, which means that it supports the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And had you read the book before, or you read it once you kind of got the script?
So I got the sides for the audition, and I was doing a play in Dublin at the time, and there was a lot of young people in the cast, and we all kind of got auditions for Connell or Marianne at the same time. We were all kind of reading the book
Mm-hmm.
furiously at the stage, but I read it just after. I hadn't read it before I got the audition, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I love this book so much. I read it
Yeah,
more times than I can count. And the show is so well done. Like,
thank
I
you.
also just, even the way it's filmed, it's so intimate, and there's like all these kind of strange close-ups, and the lighting is beautifully done. No, I found it so, so good. You
Thank
guys should
you.
be very, very proud of what you've
Yeah.
done. I wanted to ask, so did you identify with Connell in any way? And if so, like, what kind of parts of him did you feel like?
Uh, yeah, I think so. Connell is essentially from outside of Dublin, which would be the kind of main hub of education in Ireland, for example. So I lived a little bit outside Dublin, so I definitely understood that kind of um, people giving you a kind of identity in secondary school or high school, and then suddenly that being flipped on its head, and then you suddenly have to reinvent yourself. And I think Connell struggles with that in college, and I think that's something that definitely I felt, oh, I have to readjust in terms of how I present myself to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a scary jump when
Oh, it's
I always
terrible.
feel, because I left school pretty young, so I even feel like when I come back home and I'm around the people I grew up with, it's like I feel like I'm transported to like a completely different person in the time in my life. So
Oh,
I
totally, yeah.
totally get that. And I think like this kind of follows a sort of first love story. And Daisy and I were discussing just how we don't get a lot of those like high school love stories that actually feel meaningful and deep and
Yeah.
kind of express how much it matters to the people involved in them. And, you know, this goes on over 4 years and it's like they kind of keep finding their way back to each other. Did you have an experience like that or a first love that you kind of could pull from where you were like, you know, kept being drawn to this person?
Yeah, like I think it's that first instance when you feel like you're totally obsessed with another human being.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the most it's probably the most intoxicating feeling. Someone like, well, I haven't felt something like that probably ever. That kind of first draw that you have to another person is incredible. And I think what Connell and Marianne managed to navigate, not with ease or anything like that, but they managed to protect that draw that they have to each other over 4 or 5 years, which I think is incredible and something that I love about the two of them.
Mm-hmm. And did you find, because the chemistry between you and Daisy is just like so amazing when you're watching it, were there certain exercises or ways that you guys had to just like become really close in order to achieve kind of the intimacy that Sally writes these two characters as?
Yeah, I think I think it would be so funny if you saw me and Daisy the first day that we met, or the last day of shooting, just because like we were so diligent and polite with each other when it was like we were talking scripts and the characters and everything, and then by the end of it, it was just like we're the best of friends, and it's the like I couldn't imagine doing the job with anybody else other
Mm-hmm.
than Daisy. I think we were really lucky that we got to spend kind of 5 months of our lives playing incredible characters, but also enjoying each other's company.
Yeah, I think it's lucky when you get stuck with
Oh,
someone who's wonderful and that you get along with. And but
yeah.
it is also fun. You like show up to work and I'm the same way. I show up like very polite and pulled together and kind of shy, and then like, you know, a couple months later you're like letting it all hang out. So I think
Yeah,
that's
you
really
just want
good.
to have fun. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And do you feel like, you know, playing this kind of role as Connell and sort of like his feelings towards Marianne's insecurities and you know, at times, especially in the beginning of their relationship when he's kind of playing this role in school and sort of asking her to keep it a secret, I think, you know, in some ways I think that adds to the intimacy of it. In other ways I think people can perceive it as, you know, mean or harsh.
Yeah.
Kind of what was your take on that aspect of their relationship?
I did an interview today, and I think a similar question came up, and I was like, the important thing to me always when I was playing Connell is that I understood him, but it was never my job to really judge him in a way that I would hold my own standards to. I think he's somebody who's deeply insecure and wrestling with his place in society, and as a result, he doesn't always act perfectly, and I think he definitely hurts Marianne, but ultimately it comes from a place from his own insecurity and not from a point of love, because I don't think he will. This is Paul's thesis on it, that I don't think he'll ever really love somebody as much as he ever loves Marianne, regardless of
Mm-hmm.
whoever he meets in his imaginary life.
Yeah.
But I think he is impressive with where he is at in
Yeah.
his own moment.
Yeah. And I struggle with how I find the ending because sometimes I'll read the book and I'll cry my eyes out the last couple of pages, and other times I'm like super happy and I'm like, well, they're in love and they're gonna find you. How did you kind of, what was your, you know, take on the ending?
Totally the same. I think the first time I read it, I was like, "What the fuck are they
Yeah.
doing?"
You just want to scream at them.
You just want to scream at them and be like, "Okay, Marianne, you go over to New York with him and have the fucking best time of your life."
Exactly. It seems so simple.
I think that like because we actually shot the last scene quite recently, so it was like you have that perspective from reading the book tons and tons of times, and you go, that's the biggest kind of display of love, where there's two people willing to separate themselves from each other's lives and go, this is where we're at. We're not sure about where we're going to end up. We adore each other, and fingers crossed we'll meet each other again. And I think that's not something that I know that I'd ever be able to necessarily do, but it's something that Colin and Marianne have innately in themselves.
It's like trusting the idea that, you know, if it's meant to be, it'll be. I'm not
Yeah.
sure I would be able to do that either.
No,
I think I would.
in the same
Yeah.
boat.
Well, thank you so much. I know it's late there, but this has been so. When they were like, "Oh, like Daisy and Paul would come on," I was like, I literally was asked. I was begging my mom or like anyone that I knew who would read the book, that I was like, "Will you please come on so I have someone to talk about?" I did not think that it was. So this is wonderful, and I'm so excited for everyone to see it. I have the episodes, so I've just been watching them nonstop,
Great.
and
How
I
many
plan to
episodes have
continue
you
doing
seen?
that. Pardon?
How many episodes have you seen?
I've done 2 so far.
Great.
I'm trying to space it out because I have so much time on my hands, but I will probably finish them by the end of today, if I'm being fully honest.
Great. Totally good.
Well, thank you again. Thank you
Thanks
so
much, Rob.
much. Have a good
Stay
night,
safe.
and please stay
Bye, bye.
inside and stay safe.
Yeah.
Bye. I think that's, if you guys want to ask any more questions, like, please feel free. I want to answer your guys' questions. I wish there was a way, because it is a book club, and I feel like in book clubs you kind of all sit around and talk about a book. I've never been invited to a book club, although I wish that I had been. Charlotte, I love you so much. I'm so happy that you read the book too. Guys, when I recommend a book to a friend, first of all, the first book I always recommend to people asking is Normal People, 100%, because I think it applies to everyone. You know, I had a friend recommend it to me who's completely different than I am. I recommended it to my mom, to really everyone. I think everyone finds ways to sort of get attached. I'm going to read your guys' questions, though. Oh, who's your favorite character besides Marianne and Connell? That's tough. I don't know. I really was in Marianne and Connell world for most of it. I thought there were parts of Peggy that I liked. I think she was very like direct and straightforward, and I appreciate that in a friend. I really didn't like the boyfriend in Sweden at all. He was not a fan. I was not a fan of his. Oh my god, someone just sent me the reason I like reading again. That makes me very, very happy. Does anyone have any more questions about the book? And do I feel like I learned something from this book? Yes, actually. I feel like my biggest takeaway from this book, first of all, just the different ways in which we can love people, and how being loved by someone teaches us sometimes how to love ourselves. And I also think how emotional and angry almost I got at the characters for not saying what was on their minds. It encouraged me to be like, you know what, it's not worth it. You know, if you love someone and you know that you love someone, you have to tell them. And that's what I would hope somebody would do for me as well. Oh, my mom asked a question. She said, if you could change the ending, what would it be? Well, whether they ended up together or not, I think what I would change is I would have Connell say, yeah, I'm supposed to go, but I want to stay with you. And I would have Marianne say, then let's be together, because we know that we care about each other and we've been doing this forever. And I think once you keep finding your way back to someone, eventually the cycle has to break and you have to both decide that this is something that you're going to really try and give it a go. You can't say that it failed if you never really tried. And I think Marianne and Connell almost kept they let this silence between them kind of guide their relationship. And that's, life's too short to do that. So whether they ended up together or not, I'd say actually give it a try. All right, so someone said that maybe there's other books. The good news is we're still in quarantine, and even when we're not, I hope I can keep doing this. So I do have a very exciting announcement for next week. I'm going to announce it later today on my page. But yeah, I'm going to keep trying to do this if you guys are liking it. And if you guys have any books or anything that you want to touch on, like, I will take suggestions always. Charlotte said, do you think they ended up together when never meant to be together? I think either way, their feelings will always be there for each other, mostly because they grew together in such parallel ways. Even if their paths were kind of going like this, I still feel like this love for each other shifted who they were a lot. And there's, a lot of quotes about that. And there's a really great quote about Connell that said, he's not sure what friends are allowed to enjoy about each other. And I think there isn't anything friends aren't allowed to enjoy about each other. It just changes. And this kind of follows how Marianne and Connell's relationship changes. And, there are times when they are enjoying certain things about each other that make them more than friends. And there's times that they're not. And they still have these feelings. And I really loved that quote. And let's see what other quotes I've written down. I loved this quote, and this kind of goes back to the question about the ending. It says, a desire for total communication, a sense that anything unsaid is an unwelcome interruption between them. And I do think that's a big part of being in love, is the things that you don't say. It's like a pause or a halt in the relationship. And it's about being open and honest and communicating how you feel. And I think it's very apparent in this book how much Connell and Marianne feel for each other and how much they care. There's another quote that says, this is a completely different theme, but it's about Marianne, and it says, generally I find men are a lot more concerned with limiting the freedoms of women than exercising personal freedom for themselves. That is referring to Jamie from Marianne's perspective. I just found that quote really interesting, and kind of the sense of control that Marianne actually tends to ask for as she gets older. She goes more into, and I do wonder, and I want to know your guys' take on this, whether you think this sort of longing to be controlled comes from her insecurity or her relationship with Connell, or if you guys think it comes from something deeper, from her family, from the way her brother treats her. So if you guys have any opinions on that, I would really like for you guys to share those. Any more questions? This has been so fun. I sometimes force my friends to listen to me talking about a book forever, so I'm very happy that, there are people that actually want to read it. And I'm in like a Twitter group chat with some of you, so if you're in that group chat, hi. You guys have been so much fun to talk to throughout the week as you've been experiencing it, and some of you were listening to songs when you read it and crying, and I felt like I was crying with you, and it was really beautiful and magical. Someone said, I think she longed to be nurtured. I think that's a very good point. I think she kind of was searching for this validation through being loved. But it's really hard to accept love when you don't love yourself. And, I think that's why it didn't work a lot in the past with them, is they were both struggling to find who they were and to be comfortable with themselves. Connell struggled in his place in the world, like Paul was saying, and Marianne, she had this whole facade of, I don't care what people think of me. And when you guys watch these scenes of her in school, I mean, the way Daisy plays it is so brilliant, and she's just kind of this like badass, but she also has insecurities like we all do, and it's really, really well done. And I think playing someone like Connell as well, like that to me was probably the most intimidating role in this series to play, because we all read books and we imagine someone in our heads, and Connell's such a charming character, and to kind of portray that charm, I mean, Paul did such an incredible job, and Connell, like normal people who just said, they just said, I think Connell was also looking to be nurtured, and that's probably what drew them together, is they found that safety within each other. Even if they weren't together at that time, they could still go to each other to feel safe, and that is a really beautiful thing. So I think that's probably all. I'm really excited to announce the new book. I think you guys are really going to be excited about what we're reading next week, and I really want your guys' suggestions. Like, this is supposed to feel like a community effort, so I hope everyone is staying safe and staying inside, finding ways to entertain themselves like I am with books. You know, when this show comes out, you guys will have lots of content also, and I'm very excited for that. So please remember to watch the show, out April 29th, and give me recommendations for books, because I only know what I've read, but I would love to hear what you guys have read and your guys' takes on those. Thanks to everyone who watched. You guys are wonderful and amazing, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Keep reading, please. It passes the time. Bye!